Hello and welcome to Coaching Overwatch, where we discuss a variety of topics to improve our understanding of coaching in Overwatch. I'm Coach Sexy. Let's get started. On your screen, you can see all the topics I'm looking to explore over the next month or so with one bite-sized video per topic. If one piques your interest, let me know in the comments and I'll try to get to that topic more quickly. Today, we're discussing improving enemy ultimate tracking, and today we actually have a special guest to help us do that, Fahzix of Energy Esports. Fahzix, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your background in Overwatch.
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing Overwatch since basically when it started. I didn't get in a beta or anything like that, but I started playing pro around season 3. I think that's when I joined my first team called Cat 5. Then I eventually moved on to a team called Envision, and then ended up on NRG.
All right, so can you give us kind of a high-level understanding of what it takes to be a good ultimate tracker?
Yeah, sure. So in my opinion, to be a good ult tracker is a lot of experience with yourself and as well as your teammates, and then as well as playing all the heroes, etc., etc.
All right, cool. So yeah, let's go into the nitty-gritty and talk about specific things that we can do to improve ultimate tracking.
Okay, sure. So firstly, before we get into ult tracking, it's really important that first you play each hero and get a feel for how they play, and then also how much ult track they get per different situation. So different situations could be if you're feeding, if you're popping off, anything doesn't matter. So like different comps, dive comps, tank comps, anything in between like that. It's very important that you get a grasp of different.
So quick question. So is it best to do that during quick play, during scrims? Like how should players get that, that diversity? Like in what, setting?
Sure. I think the best setting would not be scrims immediately, because scrims are very chaotic and it takes definitely a lot of practice and a lot of coaching. So I think first is going into solo queue and then seeing how well you can do don't try to ult track the whole enemy team. Doing that as a beginner is extremely difficult. It'll be super overwhelming. But what you want to do is you want to get into like a second nature kind of thing, right? Where every time you die, every time you reset, every time your team dies, whatnot, you just instantly click in your head. And you're like, okay, this guy is this ult maybe, this guy is this ult maybe. Just keep doing that over and over, and then eventually you'll just do it off knowing,
Right. Okay, that makes sense. What else can we do?
So second, before you even get into like the team aspect, ult charge recording, I would say, is to figure out exactly who has those cheap ultimates. So when I mean cheap, I mean ults that build usually within one fight or one extended fight. So for this meta, for example, I would say, Tracers, Sombra, Pharah, Genji for the damage dealers they build very quickly. And then healers, like someone like Ana or Moira, usually get it between one fight. Right. And then for tanks, I would say that tanks are relatively slow. And by slow, I mean they usually take multiple fights, which is, 2 or 3 fights before they can get their ultimates. And this all just comes down to experience, you playing the hero, you seeing VODs, whatnot.
Now, you mentioned the meta, and metas can give us different compositions. So if you're dive into goats versus dive into dive, that's going to drastically change the way you ultimate track, correct?
It sure does, yeah. And this also takes a lot of studying and VOD recording and whatnot. So for example, if you're running like a Rein Zarya ground comp against a dive comp, you can assume that your Reinhardt, or if you're playing the dive, you can assume that their Reinhardt is not going to build ult charge as fast as it was a mirror comp, because the Rein's not going to be able to swing as much, for example.
Right. Okay, so what's the next step?
Sure. So third, in my opinion, we'll get into the nit-grit now, where we start basically combining everything that 1 and 2 gives us. So you're gonna have to create like a system for yourself. So what I do personally, this doesn't have to be for everybody. It definitely isn't for everybody. But during resets, when your team dies, when you die, when you know the fight's over, you want to ask your team what ults have been used if you're unsure. A lot of times when you're dead and you're respawning and the fight's pretty extended, you will never know or hear what ults the enemy used. So you want to make sure that your team feeds you information, so you can start doing that second nature thing that I talked about earlier.
Right. So basically, it's a team effort, right? It's not just one person that has to.
It sure is, yeah.
Everything. Right.
If one person has to keep track of 6 ultis constantly, even enemy ult usage, it's basically impossible. It's not possible.
And in your experience as the ultimate tracker, is it better for you to prompt your teammates for information about ultimate usage, or kind of the other way around where they immediately start feeding you information?
I would say if you're the main support on a team, which means basically non-aim support heroes, is you should be able to prompt your team into moving on, because what happens is during scrims and practice, a lot of the times people get caught up on the past, right? And you want to move your team forward, and it's very, very, very important to not get snowballed. So to not get snowballed, you always have to keep your team on the next thing. Like, so if someone dies to like a 6-man ante, right, and you guys are talking about it for the next like 30 seconds, you're wasting so much time that you could just be, resetting, saying like, okay, what else did they use here? Okay, let's start setting up now, something like that.
Right. So basically, you're just trying to keep your teammates focused on the next fight and just, moving forward. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what's after that?
Sure. And then once that's over, we can start doing what I call, this is my personal thing, by the way, so it's called an alt cycle system. So let me just read this here. It says, if an enemy uses alts 1, 2, and 4, then you can assume that 3, 5, and 6 will be next, right? And then if 3, 5, and 6 are cheap alts, which are, the Tracer Somber alts, then you can assume that they will have those for next fight. And then once that happens, if 3, 5, and 6 are slow alts, so like tanker alts or any other slow alts that you know of, you can guess, you would just have to guess whether or not they have them or not, depending on how much damage you think they've done. And then that just basically comes down to all the experience of studying VODs and all that come in, where you can guess whether or not they have it or not.
So this means that even as an amateur team trying to improve their ultimate tracking, you need that third person, a coach, a VOD recorder, whatever, recording your VODs. That way you have that observer UI with the ultimate tracking, because that's the only way you're actually going to be able to look back and review and see how you're doing, right?
Yeah, of course. Even when I play with you guys, the coach always says, hey, Fahzix, you're a little bit behind on alt tracking, right? You're like, maybe 5-10% off, and then I'm like, okay, in my head, I'm gonna add 5-10% to my guesses next time,
Right. Yeah, to kind of like recalibrate yourself.
Of course, yeah, because each meta is gonna be always different. You have to redo basically all your studying and all that.
Yeah. Okay. So another question. So do you think it's very important that the in-game leader also do ultimate tracking, or do you think a team can exist in such a way where the ultimate tracker is separate from the in-game leader or shot caller or whatever you want to call it?
In my opinion, that question is different from team to team and the person as well. If the person's not like a natural leader, then it obviously is going to be hard for him to take control of the team and say, they did this, this, this. But I believe the IGL should take control of that alt tracking and maybe have the team feed him information. I think it's the best for him, because if he's the one that's starting the conversation, then the team should be listening to him. And then it creates consistency in my eyes. Right. If you're having different people do different things, they might have like an off day, but if you have one person doing it and it's consistent, then you can rely on that person every single day to do it.
Right. Okay. And actually on that note, here's another question. Do you think a team can exist in such a way where it's viable to spread out the responsibilities of ultimate tracking across, maybe 2 or 3 players or the whole team? Like, so basically not have a centralized ultimate tracker, or do you think that's just disaster waiting to happen?
I would say limit it to at least 1 or 2 extra people at most, because again, it comes down to that consistency where not everyone's going to be consistent on that, or not everyone's going to be in the same mindset as you.
Okay. Sometimes I see the question, how important is ultimate tracking? And that can be a very difficult question to answer. So maybe a better way to frame that question is, how much time should be spent ultimate tracking in a match? So as an example, let's say you're the ultimate tracker, you know that they use Pulse Bomb and that they have Trance ready to go for next fight, but you're unsure of the other 4 ultimates. How much time should you allow for your team to discuss, the ultimate situation?
At max, 10 seconds. If you're over 10 seconds, you're doing it wrong.
Wow, so even that long. So you think that's like, it's okay to be as much as 10 seconds? Or do you think even that's
of course pushing? It's a good question, actually. It's a good question, because in my opinion, controlling the pace of the game is extremely important. And to control the pace of the game, you have to know what alts do what and what alts they have, right? So if you're losing track of what alts they have, you're going to lose track of the game and you're going to lose tempo. And it's very, very important that you get that down.
Okay, so in your opinion, it's actually very vital. You should use maybe, in your opinion, half or maybe slightly more than half of that downtime to, really get into how close they are to ultimates and what they have, etc. So that way you can kind of formulate a good game plan, right?
Yes. Actually, before the alt tracking, my personal IGLing, I have a system as well. So the first thing that comes to your head is the time, in my opinion. So you want to look at the time, see how many fights you have, and how, if you have to stall or whatnot. And then for 2 is positioning. If you have to move people up, if you cap, A point, King 0, you got to move people up, right? Instantly. Yeah. You can't just be talking about alts there because your team's like, well, what the hell, where are we going, But so those 2 things have to come first, and then the alt tracking, in my opinion. So you have a lot of leeway there with that if you do it like that. Because usually after the fights, it's very chaotic, and you want to just basically start a new conversation.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, is there any last imparting words of wisdom you want to give to the audience?
Sure, yeah. Me saying this, it seems fairly simple, right? But you have to understand how many hours I put into studying VODs and just practicing constantly, even in solo queue. So don't give up. If it doesn't work the first week, first month, it took me probably a month and a half to get even decently close to alt tracking. So don't think you can't do it, because it's not that hard.
Yeah, I think let's stress that to the viewers, that it takes so many hours to get even just decent ultimate tracking. And actually, just one final note, do you, like, for someone who only has access to solo queue and they want to just, improve it in their solo queue environment where they don't have that third person recording, do you think that it's realistic to kind of practice that skill without having, that feedback of, oh yes, I got it right, and no, I didn't?
It might be impractical, but if you can make it a habit of doing it every single time your team resets, then I think it's good. So if you die and you complain in voice chat or something, I feel like that's kind of counterproductive, right? But instead you could be like, oh, hey guys, what else did they use? Or maybe you already know. You're like, okay, they use this and this, so maybe they got this next fight, and just keep working on that and make it like second nature to you.
Right. So it is worth practicing. It just obviously won't be as good as having the feedback after the match, right?
Yep, it's like if you go onto a baseball field and you play baseball, and you've only played it like for a couple hours ever, you're not gonna be good, right? You just got to keep working at it. That's all.
Right. Yeah. Nope. That makes sense. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you for all of the insight and wisdom. Super, super helpful. Thank you so much for the help, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
All right. Please give Fahzix a huge thank you by following him on Twitter and watching his stream on Twitch. The links are below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.